A little while ago, in the off hours of writing scripts, I was browsing the back shelves at a little bookstore that I happened upon while wandering downtown. In my stroll down the dusty aisles of the math and science section, something called out to me, as often happens during a treasure hunt. I reached out and grabbed this little book off the shelf. Its marbled and esoteric cover reminded me of looking at old Magic cards, especially the frames on blue cards from back then. This artwork on Time and Tide is as hard to decipher as it is to understand fractals, black holes, and whatever Gödel's theorem is. Glancing at the author's name, I was once again reminded of Magic, but this time a very familiar name of a player. We'll get to that later. The book Chance and Chaos by Belgian-French mathematician David Ruel talks about the way scientists have studied chance in the physical world. His book is an attempt to comfort us, or guide us, through this chaotic and nonsensical universe we live in. I began to reflect on what this means in the game of Magic, the countless decisions we face each time we shuffle up. Every action we take on the card table is a consequence of chance, and we do everything in our power to control it. We play to our outs, and try to follow the faint line that leads us to victory. Each time we stack up our neatly laid out deck lists and give them a good riffle, we hold in our hands an impossibly rare and ephemeral object that fades out of existence the moment we deal our opening 7. Each small decision we make compounds, leading us down a winding and unpredictable path. Then, as we go to our draw step, we calculate what we need to keep up the advantage, as the number of outs we have left slowly dwindles. When it seems all hope is lost, we look upon with wishful eyes as we peel the next card off the top. Sometimes, amidst the chaos, we decide to be masters of our own fate and overcome the odds. There are moments like these that happen on Magic's highest stage. Sometimes these moments make us question why we even play this game at all, when it seems like people can win through pure chance. Like David Ruel's book, this video serves to bring comfort to us amidst the chaos, to reflect on these peculiar moments and understand them in a way that is more, let's say, magical. I want to pause and say the following clips from Magic tournaments feature high-stakes competitive scenarios, and losing these games is not to be taken lightly. That said, further discussion of these clips is not meant to bring light on the loser of the game and shame them of their bad fortune, but rather to offer a unique opinion on what makes these moments so special. What is luck? It's not a tangible quality that something can have, yet we prescribe it to many an object or person. Those are my lucky socks, we say. That player won that hand with sheer luck. Duncan Pritchard and Lee John Whittington write in The Philosophy of Luck that there must be 3 conditions present in order for us to observe the phenomenon known as luck: chance, significance, and lack of control. They then go on to offer further subdivisions of each category. I'll omit all the nitty-gritty and summarize that the gameplay of Magic the Gathering can be defined through the following combination. Chance is defined as objective probability. Chancy events are events whose occurrence is objectively unlikely. There are a set number of cards in the deck, and the quantities of each card is known. Each mulligan and draw has a calculable probability. Significance is defined as the lucky agent having some interest, and the lucky event having some objectively positive or negative effect on it. In the case of Magic, if each player's interest is in winning the game, lucky events can be as significant as drawing your 3rd land drop, or needing a specific card to decide the outcome of a match. Finally, lack of control is defined as there not being a basic action that the lucky agent could perform which they know would bring about the lucky event, and how it would do so. The best we can do is knock the top of the deck and hope that it responds kindly. Distilling a game as wonderfully complex as Magic into these 3 elements makes it seem pretty boring. This would not be a spectator sport if the game could be understood so empirically. What throws a sort of wrench into the formula of luck are the players. We make mistakes, we miss lethal, we don't always make the perfect calculations. And yet, at the same time, we can bluff, we can pray, and sometimes we seem to pull off the impossible. At this, we arrive at the infamous match at Pro Tour Dominaria, Wyatt Darby versus Gonçalo Pinto, in Game 5 of the finals. Now, if you don't know this moment, I'll let it play out in its totality. For those who remember, enjoy and relive the moment.
He's deep in the tank. Look at the intensity in the feature match area that both players know how much is on the line and how close this game has gotten. He's going to crew up the Aethersphere Harvester, go for the lethal attack. Pinto does not need to do anything as far as pumping goes, but it was a braid off the top of the library to kill the Aethersphere Harvester.
That'll keep Wyatt in for another turn.
He could go to 1.
Yeah, he could either put him to 1 or just play out a few more creatures.
He's going to put him to 1. Wyatt Darby has to find an answer for that Thopter this draw step or we are done here. Was that a Glorybringer?
That's a Glorybringer.
Oh my goodness.
Did he just draw Glorybringer off the top of the library?
So
Gonçalo's at 11. Is there any way he can swing this around?
So he blocks Hazoret. He takes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. Glorybringer
Are you
kills,
serious?
Glorybringer kills
Are you
Chain
serious
Whirler.
right now?
That's 11.
But Hazoret gets blocked. Kari's at 3. Full Star Mage is 1. Chain Whirler is 3. Glorybringer's 4.
Did he just
That's 11 damage.
The Pro Tour Glorybringer off the top for Wyatt Darby? He's done the math. He sends it in, cleals the Chain Whirler. All Pinto can do is look at lethal damage. He can't believe that Wyatt Darby just stole the Pro Tour from him.
In reflecting on this match, I once again asked the question, what is luck? At 34 minutes and 52 seconds, Gonçalo Pinto hands back Wyatt Darby his deck. For the rest of this game, both of these piles of cards will not be shuffled. Like the other 4 games, every single draw from this moment on is predetermined. This game will last all but 9 turns. Each player will see a total of 8 more cards. Gonçalo Pinto keeping 7 on the draw, Wyatt Darby with a mulligan to 6 on the play. In this best of 5, 4 games have been played, each player searching for that elusive third victory. 2 players enter the battle, only one will emerge victorious. Parsing through all the thin threads that lead to the inevitable end is a chore best left for beings beyond our time frame. And yet, we force ourselves to undertake this insurmountable task each time we begin a game. These players engage in a duel of wits, intertwining paths which I cannot even begin to explore. Each decision splits the timelines, the line becoming more and more narrow as the variance dwindles down, until the final moments where the thread runs thin and the ends begin to fray. Pinto, at this point, looks down at the split ends that lay in his hands. Which one to grab? Which one to summit the peak? At this moment, Pinto is calculating what the one card in Darby's hand could be, and how to play around it. Darby is at 4 life, and if he has no removal in hand, an attack with both the Aethersphere Harvester and Thopter token would be lethal. There are multiple other lines that can guarantee victory for Pinto. He reaches out, and attacks with only the Harvester and token. The rope snaps. Darby shows a braid, targeting the Aethersphere Harvester. Pinto can now only use Pia Nalar to put Darby down to 1 life. Tapped out, Pinto passes to Darby. Darby has exactly 1 out that will win him the game on the spot if he draws it. He draws the appropriately named Glorybringer off the top of the deck to seal the deal. I ask for the 3rd time, what is luck? In retrospect, if we look at Darby's turn 8, his attack with Hazoret the Fervent guaranteed a 100% loss against Pinto's current board state. And also, we understand that Pinto missed lethal on his turn 8. There were multiple lines he could have taken which would have played around any card Wyatt Darby was running in his deck. For example, he could have sacrificed some artifacts to Pia Nalar's second ability, allowing him to make Darby's creatures unable to block. He would have then been able to swing with enough attackers to make any removal spell irrelevant. Under our current definition of luck, the result of this game is incomprehensible. After a certain point, the objective probability of Wyatt Darby winning this game was 0%. There is nothing Wyatt Darby could have done to shift these odds. And yet, despite that, he emerged the victor. But if we look back at Pritchard and Whittington's text and their multitude of definitions, perhaps we can re-examine this moment with a different lens. Chance can be defined as modality. Chancy events are events that would fail to occur in close possible worlds. And lack of control can be defined as the lucky agent not being free to do something that would help produce or prevent the chancy event. Wyatt Darby drawing that glory bringer, although unlikely, is ultimately not the lucky event. The true culprit happened mere moments before. I again would like to remind ourselves that Gonçalo Pinto is an excellent player. None of us sitting on the couch watching this replay could have made it as far as he did. But alas, we are human after all. We're susceptible to pressure, to mental weariness. We've all lost a game on the last turn and have never forgiven ourselves. In those final critical moments, Pinto is unable to remember about Pianolar's second ability. Lack of control. Wyatt Darby decided to throw out all preconceived notions of luck, channeling that old adage of never tell me the odds. He pushed all in on a 0% win. He put Pinto in the driver's seat. Wyatt Darby bet his tournament life, whether he knew it or not, on the odds that his opponent would make a mistake. What are those odds? It might be impossible to know. In other close possible worlds, perhaps Pinto would have taken a couple extra seconds on his turn to think through his plays and parse through all the lines. But perhaps, on the brink of trying to complete a 3-game reverse sweep, with the pressure of the crowd, with victory just barely within his grasp, with all of those factors stacked up, even in those alternate realities, perhaps it was inevitable that Gonçalo Pinto would lose that game. Was Wyatt Darby lucky? Who's to say? I, for one, think that the universe had already decided who would win. It just wanted to put on a show.
Any way he can swing this around?
So he blocks Hazard, he takes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Glorybringer
Are you
killed,
serious?
Glorybringer killed
Are you
Chain
serious
Whirler.
right now?
That's 11.
Spot. Hazard gets blocked. Kari's M is 3.
Nothing
Full
else.
Star Mage is 1. Chain Whirler is
8,
3.
11.
Glorybringer's 4.
Did he just
That's 11
top-deck
damage.
the Pro Tour
That's 11
Glorybringer
damage.
off the top for Wyatt Darby? He's done the math.
Oh,
he sends it
my.
in. Cleals the Chain Whirler. All Pinto can do.
The miracle that is the universe is represented in the humble loaf of bread. 6 million years of evolution has taught us that flour, water, this mysterious thing known as yeast, and heat, combined together in specific ways, creates a beautiful thing called bread. In a way, playing a game of magic is a lot like baking bread. Indulge me, if you will. I have before me the carefully measured ingredients required for a loaf of country bread. Everyone has their own ratios and recipes, a result of years of testing. In the same line, a tournament-winning deck list is a result of months of preparation, tested an endless amount of times until it's ready to face the fire. Bread recipes are fickle. The most passionate amongst food scientists know that adjustments need to be made depending on the environment. Likewise, a great Magic deck comes with a sideboard that requires an equal amount of studying. The greatest players know exactly when and how to make sideboard changes to best suit the matchup. A good baker knows how to knead the dough and let it rest. This helps develop the gluten networks, helping the flour hydrate and giving the bread a better texture. In that same sense, a good deck doesn't win without a proper pilot. The ingredients must be guided together to form a cohesive game plan, or else it cannot win. That said, bread is malleable. The same recipe will not always yield the same result. We cannot control the microscale chemistry that takes place. And again, a 60-card deck will not offer the same draw each game. Only the best players know how to navigate this pseudo-randomness to victory. The fiery crucible awaits our creation, a test of our material. We put faith in our dough as we let the heat of the oven take control. The oven, the fire, is a test of our resolve. The more we play with the deck, the more we become experienced with it. Our skills and understanding grow as we forge it against the heat of battle, the same way a beautiful crust forms on a loaf of bread. When we pull our dough out of the fire, the baker's marks are revealed, the flourishes we impart before we cast it into the fire. This is the critical step. What makes Magic so memorable are the personalities we bring into the game. The confidence, the style, all is revealed through the fire. Some players make immortal moments, not just because they were magicians, but because they were bakers. This brings us to Pro Tour Kyoto in Game 5 of the quarterfinals match between Gabriel Nassif and Matteo Orsini Jones. Doing some internet archaeology, I was able to recover the full footage from Pro Tour Kyoto. I think it would be a treat to rewatch this footage that has sort of been lost to time. So I'll recount the events of this legendary match leading up to the iconic moment. Nassif is piloting a 5-color control deck, running cards like Cryptic Command, Volcanic Fallout, and Wall of Reverence, while Orsini Jones is on white-black tokens, with cards like Thoughtseize, Spectral Procession, and Elspeth Knight Errant. The game begins as innocent as any other. Nassif is on a mulligan to 6, and Orsini Jones on a keep 7. The footage from back then was pretty blurry, so it's difficult to tell what is in their opening hand. We'll get a glimpse of their hands later in the game. Nassif opens with a Vivid Meadow and passes the turn. This card is integral to his 5-color mana base due to the interaction with Reflecting Pool. On Orsini Jones's turn, he plays the Windbrisk Heights, putting a very threatening Ajani Goldmane under it with the Hideaway ability. This ability lets Orsini Jones play the Hidden Away spell without paying its mana cost if he attacks with 3 or more creatures in a turn. Heights presents an inevitable threat that will lead to a very tough decision for Nassif in a couple turns. Turn 2, Nassif plays an island and passes the turn, keeping up mana signaling interaction. Orsini Jones plays the Caves of Koilos, and the first damage of the game comes when he tries to resolve a Tidehollow Sculler, looking to pick apart Nassif's game plan. Nassif responds with his 1 sideboard copy of Remove Soul, countering the Tidehollow Sculler. Orsini Jones passes the turn. Turn 3, Nassif plays Vivid Meadow and again passes the turn, signaling another counterspell. Orsini Jones plays another Caves of Koilos and taps for 3 white, putting himself to 17 to try and resolve a Spectral Procession. This time, Nassif has no response, and Orsini Jones creates 3 1/1 white spirits and then passes the turn. Turn 4, Nassif draws a Vivid Marsh, and at this point we get our first glimpse into Nassif's hand. He's currently holding 2 Cryptic Commands, a Broodmate Dragon, an Exotic Orchard, and the Vivid Marsh he just drew. Facing down 3 creatures, Nassif knows he will have to interact in order to deal with the potential threat under Windbrisk Heights. He plays an Exotic Orchard and passes the turn. Orsini Jones plays Mutavault and then casts Thoughtseize, trying to once again pick apart Nassif's hand as he gets ready to make his attack. Nassif goes into the tank, weighing his different options on how he'll deal with the Windbrisk Heights. With Cryptic Command, he could counter the Thoughtseize and bounce the Windbrisk Heights, removing 2 threats with 1 card. He could also counter and then bounce a Spirit token so that Orsini Jones can only attack with 2 creatures. All of these lines present only temporary solutions, however. After much deliberation, Nassif simply lets the Thoughtseize resolve. Orsini Jones' life total drops to 14, and he discards Broodmate Dragon from Nassif's hand. He goes to attack and swings with 3 spirits. The life totals are now 17 to 14 with Nassif in the lead. In his second main, Orsini Jones activates Windbrisk Heights' second ability since he attacked with 3 creatures this turn, and attempts to cast Ajani Goldmane, knowing that Nassif has 2 Cryptic Commands. Nassif is forced to respond with one of them, choosing the modes of counter and draw. Nassif draws an Esper Charm, and Orsini Jones passes the turn. Nassif feels that he's in a more comfortable position, now that he's dealt with the threat of Windbrisk Heights. Turn 5, Nassif draws a Plume Veil, plays Vivid Marsh, and passes the turn, once again holding up mana for Cryptic Command. On his turn, Orsini Jones goes straight to combat, and chips Nassif down to 14. In his second main, He attempts to cast Elspeth Knight Errant, knowing Nassif has a counterspell. Elspeth is too big of a threat, so Nassif is forced to counter again, choosing the modes of counter and draw. This time he draws Broken Ambitions, another counterspell. Orsini Jones plays another Windbrisk Heights, this time hiding away a Path to Exile. He passes the turn. Turn 6. Nassif draws Infest and plays it, clearing Orsini Jones's board. Parity is reached once again. The game stretches onward, Orsini Jones slowly chipping away at Nassif's life total, and presenting threats that Nassif is forced to deal with on the stack. On turn 9, Orsini Jones casts Thoughtseize, which resolves, and he sees Nassif's hand of a singular Reflected Pool. Knowing Nassif has nothing, Orsini Jones goes with his main plan and attacks with 2 Burrenton Forge Tenders and a Mutavault, putting Nassif down to 4, presenting lethal damage next turn. He passes. One more turn until victory. As we enter turn 10, Nassif knows his back is against the wall. But Nassif is a baker. Let's go back to his interview with Randy Buehler, where he divulges the secrets of his recipe. Randy Buehler asks Nassif what his advice is for people who've never seen his brew before.
So walk us through, for people who haven't maybe played 5-color control a lot, what are you trying to do? What's the overall game plan?
Nassif responds,
You just want to survive long enough to drop a Broodmate Dragon or an Ultimatum or both, just.
Flashing back to the present, Nassif goes to his draw step, but he doesn't look at his card. Like a true craftsman, Nassif trusts in his deck to work and rearranges his lands, signaling that he wants to cast Cruel Ultimatum, the card he believes that will help him bring this game back. Then the moment happens.
Cruel Ultimatum is the card he's hoping to top deck. And... Oh my God! Off the top! Wow! He arranged the mana in the shape of the one spell that he had to draw. Form of... Oh my goodness!
Randy Buehler, who interviewed Nassif earlier, is on commentary and is in utter disbelief that the recipe worked. When adjusting his recipe, Nassif sided out his second copy of Cruel Ultimatum, bringing in more necessary ingredients to survive the early game. Had Nassif kept 2 copies of Ultimatum in his deck, he might have drawn it earlier in the game and got it Thoughtseized away. He took a calibrated risk, and his precision paid off. As they say, you can't Thoughtseize the top of the deck. When faced with limited resources, Nassif worked each card to its maximum potential, the gluten holding strong until it needed to face the fire. Under the heat of the pressure, Nassif's deck held together, each draw step slowly building like a Maillard reaction, changing the flavor and texture of the game until the final step. Forged by the fire, Nassif's scorelines gave rise to the dough, culminating in the beautiful moment that we all remember. A true artist trusts the process. The game ended appropriately with Nassif following up with Broodmate Dragon, and with Orsini Jones finding no answer, the match was over. Drop a Broodmate Dragon, or an Ultimatum, or both. The camera pans to Nassif, who smiles unfazed, as if he never had his doubts. The game ended just as prophesied. Alright, cut the crap. We're here to talk about magic, not make analogies to baking and philosophy. And one thing that are pure magic are top decks. They are every bit a part of Magic the Gathering as the lore and the card design. And yet, some people like to dismiss these quote-unquote strokes of luck as not requiring skill. People dislike the idea of lack of control, as they believe it decreases the amount of skill required to win a game. In episode 39 of Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast, he dedicates his 40 minutes to talking about randomness in Magic.
Today, I thought I'd do something a little random. Well, thought I'd talk about randomness.
He argues that the ability to react to randomness in doses is very, very skill testing. Magic's inherent randomizer is the library. You can control randomness by selecting which 60 cards are in your deck, but there is variance in what you draw each game. Navigating the randomness of what you might draw each turn is at its core still very skill testing, and thus still puts the more experienced player at the advantage. He notes the need for randomness in game design. He puts it quite simply.
Because there is novelty in not knowing things. If humans never have a need for the unknown, it keeps them from ever venturing out. It's why humans have curiosity.
He also combats the notion that top decking is a skillless aspect of the game.
Sometimes people think of the top of the library as a coin flip, but what they miss is that every turn you buy yourself another turn, you buy another draw. Yeah, eventually I drew the card to beat you, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm so lucky. I spent lots of time and energy getting to the point where I got to draw all those cards, getting to the card I needed to beat you.
That last part is crucial. This episode came out about a year after the events at Pro Tour Avacyn Restored, and the newly debuted Miracle mechanic. What transpired was a beautiful showcase of everything Mark Rosewater is talking about here. Magic was somewhat different back then, and the players were playing a different type of constructed format, so some background context is required. First of all, the Paris Mulligan was still implemented, meaning that each time a player decides to mulligan their opening hand, they draw one less new card for each time they mulligan. Second of all, the Legend rule was on its second iteration, wherein there could only be one instance of a legendary permanent on the battlefield at any time, across any number of players' boards. If another instance were to appear, all instances would be immediately sent to their owners' graveyards. Lastly, the format they were playing was block constructed, meaning they could only build decks using sets from the namesake block. In this case, it was Innistrad block. The metagame leading up to the Pro Tour was defined by a slew of aggressive decks. These decks included Naya, Green-White Aggro, and Bant Aggro. There was a relatively low amount of mana fixing lands in this block constructed format, with only 5 enemy colored duels, Cavern of Souls, and Evolving Wilds. The 3-color decks were using the premier mana dork in Avacyn's Pilgrim to fix their white mana, running a much higher ratio of forests than the other colors. The big threats across the field were Huntmaster of the Fells, a 4-drop that provided continuous value as well as transforming into a huge threat itself, as well as Wolfir Silverheart, a card that put an enormous 12 power on the board for only 5 mana, as long as it was soul bonded. Notably, the Bant decks are splashing white for exactly 4 copies of Geist of St. Traft, an aggressive legendary creature that could attack for 6 power while only costing 3 mana. A turn 1 Avacyn's Pilgrim could summon the 2/2 Hexproof on turn 2. This all culminated in one of the strangest, wildest, and most entertaining decks to ever win a Pro Tour. Alexander Haynes' Blue-White Miracles deck. In Avacyn Restored, Magic introduced a new mechanic called Miracle. It allows you to cast powerful cards for a much cheaper cost, if and when it is the first card drawn each turn. Some of these effects included Temporal Mastery, whose Miracle cost essentially allows you to run 4 copies of Time Walk in your deck. Terminus, which was a 1-mana Wrath of God if you miracled it. In fact, it has some upsides compared to Wrath of God, since it bypasses death triggers and doesn't put potential reanimate targets into the graveyard. The issue was inconsistency. You couldn't reliably draw these cards off the top when you needed to. Other formats with more cards have effects that allow you to stack the deck in a way to take advantage of the Miracle mechanic. But in Innistrad block constructed, there were none such cards. Most players seemed to be wary of this, so very few Miracle cards made the top 8 decks. But Alexander Hayne didn't care. He understood that these effects were so powerful that miracling even just one of them could turn the tide of a game. Chaining multiple Miracle effects together could end the game on the spot. Thus, he and some other players developed the following deck as a sort of counter-strategy to the metagame. He ran 16 Miracle cards in his main deck, essentially giving him a 1/4 chance to draw a Miracle card each turn. The deck's main win condition was an Entreat the Angels, a card that could put an absurd amount of power on the board early on, while also being a decent card when hardcast. Hayne said it was reminiscent of another control deck late game staple.
Even for 7 mana, it's like a Broodmate Dragon, sort of.
Devastation Tide and Terminus were the deck's sweepers, allowing Hain to stall the game until he could play a huge Entreat the Angels. Tying it all together was Temporal Mastery, which Hain described as the most tricky card to play in the deck. Early on, if you miracled it, it could serve as ramp, allowing you to hardcast Terminus and Devastation Tide from your hand earlier. In the late game, it could combo with Entreat the Angels, allowing you to go for lethal attacks across multiple extra turns. In his Deck Tech interview with Brian David Marshall, BDM remarks quite incredulously over Hain's decision to include this many miracle cards.
You understand this is block constructed, right?
Yes.
You understand this is not a legacy GP or anything like that.
Well,
it's one of the most charming and funniest Deck Tech interviews out there. I suggest you all go watch it after this. The only other miracle card that appeared in the top 8 was Bonfire of the Damned in decks that had red, looking to use a one-sided board wipe or a burn finisher in the late game. The rest of Hain's deck was engineered to perfection. Due to the nature of the miracle mechanic requiring you to cast the card when you draw it, it allowed sorcery spells to break timing restrictions, meaning you could cast miracle cards at instant speed if you draw them during your opponent's turn. Hain ran 4 copies of Think Twice and 4 copies of Thought Scour to maximize the amount of miracle draws he would have throughout the game. Thought Scour also had the additional benefit of putting relevant flashback cards into the graveyard, essentially drawing him an extra card if he milled one. One of those key cards was Feeling of Dread, a common that appeared in 0 other lists in the top 8. Hain was running 4 of them. Hain used the card to its maximum potential, using it to tap down Avacyn's Pilgrim on multiple occasions, slowing down aggressive starts and shutting down hands that had low land counts. The card was also perfect for his strategy of stalling, tapping down attackers until he could enter the late game and find a miracle card to sweep the board. One of the last key cards was Tamiyo the Moonsage, which served 2 main purposes. Tamiyo's +1 could once again stifle the opponent's mana fixing, tapping down Cavern of Souls, Avacyn's Pilgrim, or perhaps their single plains, island, or mountain in play. It could also be used to tap down opposing threats, like the aforementioned Wolfir Silverheart and Huntmaster of the Fells. Tamiyo's -2 was a great way to refill after an opponent goes for a big attack, and also combos with Feeling of Dread to help draw even more cards. Tamiyo's ultimate, if she got there, was an alternate win condition in combination with Thought Scour. Every blue mana you had open was either a draw 3 for yourself or a mill 2 for your opponent. The mana base was also comedically simple: 4 Evolving Wilds, 13 Islands, and 10 Plains. In Hain's sideboard were copies of Snapcaster Mage, allowing him to reuse his miracle cards in the late game, as well as doubling up on his counterspells. His sideboard also included his own Geist of St. Traft, acting essentially as removal for opponents' Geists. A hilarious fun fact, it's also unsurprisingly the only deck on all of MTG Top 8 to register a copy of Angel's Mercy in either the mainboard or sideboard. If only BDM had asked Hain about that. And yet, despite his carefully fine-tuned miracle machine, Hain's deck still hinged on one thing. I'll let Hain and BDM tell it to us.
So I think what's important to note there is not that you know you're going to draw Entreat,
right,
but you have to know that you could draw Entreat.
You have to think about every potential draw you can have, and you have to figure out when to draw cards to hit that card, and it's very hard.
Hope. Alexander Hain's deck ran on Hope. And of course, the team had to give the deck an appropriate name.
So 16 miracles.
16.
The deck is actually called Hallelujah.
Yeah, Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Each draw step was as suspenseful as the next, as Hain paused to see if he found a miracle on the top. In his run through top 8, Hain flipped a total of 23 miracles off the top of his library. In his final game against Galdanis Vidugiris, he flips and Entreat the Angels on turn 7, putting 20 power worth of angels onto the board. On Galdanis' turn, there was little he could do but listen to the sound of beating wings and holy light shining down on Hain's side of the board. He forfeited this game after making his final attack. The commentators and Canadian choir rejoiced in the glory of Haynes' miraculous victory. It might not have been the best Pro Tour deck, but to me, this deck and run embodies the quintessential spirit of playing Magic. You look at the cards available to you. You brew a deck with some friends. You don't take yourself too seriously. And most importantly, you play to win. And who knows, maybe you'll find a couple miracles waiting for you along the way. And in that sense, contrary to popular understanding, this is the best Magic deck.
Miracles and intriguing. Oh, mastery off the top, and then intriguing angels. And 2 miracles go away. It was Temporal Mastery and Devastation time, but there's a third miracle. It's Entreat the Angels. Treat the Angels for 5. Attack Tameo.
No blocks.
No blocks. There it is! Hallelujah! Alexander Hayne is your Pro Tour Amazon Restored champion of 2012. He entreated the Angels. Canada goes wild.
So why make this video? As Commander continues to increase its lead as the most popular way to play Magic, there is also an ever-increasing sentiment of yearning for the long-gone days of 1v1 being the premier way to play Magic. I came across these 3 videos recently that coincidentally all came out around the same time. They all kind of touch on similar points, the general idea being gameplay issues relevant due to the social and casual setting of the EDH format. The one that stuck with me the most was Trinket Mage's video titled, "Is it wrong to win in EDH?" which the top comment points out quite flippantly is a completely ridiculous idea in the context of a 1v1. This video is sort of made in the same vein, but instead of taking a pessimistic outlook on EDH, because I still enjoy playing it, I wanted to remind myself why I love 1v1 so much. So instead of asking, "Is it wrong to win?" I wanted to pose the question, why do we win? Why do we win? Not why do we want to win, but why do we have winners? In 2006 at Pro Tour Honolulu, Craig Jones immortalized his name in his Game 5 match against Olivier Ruel. There's that name I was talking about. Whether he knew it or not, this moment would come to influence every game of Magic from that point onward. Craig Jones became the winner of that game because he overcame the odds. He believed in his deck, he had hope, and he made choices that led him to be able to do so. Choices that are ultimately meaningless outside of the rules we bind to the cards for a game that we made up. Rules that give us meaning. Rules that give us winners. There is something in us that strives to give meaning to meaninglessness. Sometimes the universe wants to help out and presents it in a spectacular fashion.
And then, Entreat Angels.
Good shot for the win!
Shot off the top for
Good
Luis.
shot for the win! And
What is it? What is it? What is it?
Practice return! Practice return!
Glory winner off the top for Wyatt Darby. He's done the math. He sends it in.
What is on top of the deck? Oh, it's Lightning Helix! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Thank you for reaching the end of this video. I first want to thank my loyal patrons who help support me on my creative journey. If you want to support the channel, head on over to Patreon. It's free to join with an optional paid subscription. I write a free blog about some of my favorite Magic card designs, so if you love learning about the intricate balance between flavor, form, and function, be sure to follow that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, and a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next time I upload. Comment down below what your most memorable Magic moments are, and what impressions they had on you as a player. Links to all the moments covered in this video will be in the description below. If anything, I hope that this video inspired you to go down to your local game store and participate in some drafts, so you can chase that feeling of a game being down to the wire. Go out and enjoy some proper 1v1 showdowns. It can be anything from Dan, a battle box, a cube draft, a sealed event, pauper, modern, or standard. Go out into this chaotic world and be the master of your own fate. Channel the magic playing avatars and rip a top deck that defies all the odds. I was participating in an Edge of Eternities draft recently, and I top decked a Beyond the Quiet, the turn I was facing lethal. What an exhilarating feeling. I want to quickly thank some of the pieces of media that helped inspire this video. About a year ago, I watched Kinds of Kindness by Yorgos Lanthimos, and that style of triptych storytelling, odd chapter names, and yet somehow cohesively tying everything together through a cathartic theme really stuck with me. So the structure of this video was lightly based off of that. Thanks Yorgos for putting out a real masterpiece. Thank you to LSV and his daily vintage cube drafts. Watching him every day navigate the randomness of drafting and top decking was really the inspiration behind this video, and also the inspiration to help me build my own retro cube to play with my playgroup. Be sure to check out his videos if you want a masterclass on how to force artifacts every draft. And lastly, thanks for watching.